Hey everyone, this is Levi from Truth Beauty Comics, and I'm really excited to tell you about my new comic called Open Your Eyes. So, Open Your Eyes is a modern retelling of the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale, and it's appropriate for young adults and up. If you enjoy a lot of the themes and comics we talk about on our podcast, then I think you'll like it. So here's the deal. I've already written and drawn the first issue, but I need to raise money to fund the printing, so I'm doing a Kickstarter campaign. Open Your Eyes is officially launching on Kickstarter on July 14th, and that means we have 30 days to fund the printing of the new issue. If you'd like to support the printing and get your own copy, go to Kickstarter.com and search for Open Your Eyes. Lost and separated from his cousins in a valley filled with strange and wonderful creatures, Phoney Bone begins to build a life. He'll live through the winter, make friends, and meet Thorn, a young woman who might be more important than she appears. Today on Truth Beauty Comics. Welcome to Truth Beauty Comics. I'm Levi, a cartoonist.
And I'm Felix, the guy who likes comics.
And this is the podcast where we look for transcendence in a pulpy medium. Today we'll be talking about Bone, issues 2, 3, and 4 by Jeff Smith. And as always, you can look at our show notes on our Patreon, which have some images from the comic we're discussing. So last week, Felix, we did our level best to get through the two first issues, but just turned out there was too much to talk about. So we are now hopefully going to cover a bit more ground with Bone. And I wonder how many people this second issue, as we kind of look at it, is an interesting one for me because it almost feels like, you know how with TV shows you have like the pilot episode, you know, and the pilot episode is always slightly different than the regular show because they have to like maybe do a little bit of recasting or it usually like captures the spirit of the show, but some things kind of change when you actually get into the regular season. I wonder, because there's certain subtle things that have changed in Smith's art between the first issue and the second. And when you look at the publication, they're like 4 months apart, which is not a long time. But I almost wonder if he had that first issue kind of around for a while before it got published. Because I feel like this second issue, while the first issue was fantastic and it's a great introduction, I just feel like the second issue is where really he starts to, he's kind of subtly leveled up in his art, especially in kind of his storytelling choices. But I don't know if you have ever thought that when you're reading through this, but I've always been a little bit curious as to the history between these two issues.
Yeah, my sense of this is here's my guess is that he'd had the first issue ready and published basically as is for a long time. And then he had the script for the first two. And then he had plans for the rest. Because I think the art, as you say, like does level up. Like characters are just a lot more on model. Even though the first issue's art, I think, is stellar. But it feels more sort of completely Bone. Like when you look at the first couple pages, particularly of like the way Smiley is in the first issue, like that's just not what Smiley looks like for the whole 1,000 pages, except for that one issue. And then the writing, it's striking to me because the second issue, how do I put it? I mean, it's getting you acclimatized to this weird new world that Phone has found himself in, but it feels more like a sort of funny animal comic from the 50s.
Yeah, very Walt Kelly.
Yeah. And that's not an insult. Like I love Walt Kelly, and I think that he does all the stuff in here really well. But and there are characters introduced and things, but sort of from issue 3 onward, writing wise, it feels a little bit more coherent is too strong, because it's not that this is incoherent, but there's more of a directionality from sort of issue 3 until whatever it is, issue 60 or whatever, when it ends. There's a clear kind of forward momentum, that I think is sort of strangely missing from the writing in this issue.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a lot. You're right. It's more of I think it is an odd issue. Maybe the second one, or not odd, but it's a little bit unique. And
Yeah.
not to cut ahead, but I think my favorite parts, my favorite. I mean, and Bone is such a long story, and it takes its time, right? It takes its
Yeah.
time to kind of move through stuff. It's never boring, but it really it each issue kind of has like a little development that kind of advances the plot along, but there's also a lot of fun sequences that go along with it.
Yeah.
I think my Bone is at its best though is when you have all the characters together and they're bouncing off each other. Especially when you get like the three cousins and then kind of Grandma Ben and and Lucius who shows up, and I think probably my least favorite sequence in the entire Bone book is when they split up. And I think the Rockjaw sequence, whole arc, where they separate all the characters. To me, I've always found that part like, it's not terrible, but I just don't enjoy it very much, and I think
it's not exciting and pacey in the way that the other stuff is.
Yeah, and you just don't have the dynamics of the characters together that I think.
There's not the kind of crackle of energy between
Right.
characters, because you don't get them.
Mm-hmm.
The people they're playing off with are not characters that you care as much about or that are as fleshed out. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I agree with you on the writing in the second issue here, or at least the plotting. I do think his art is just, the art in this issue
Fantastic.
is so good. And and this is where I do feel like, feels like there's a lot of maturing that's happened in subtle ways. It's not like it looks like radically different or anything, but these action sequences are kind of, I think, one of just kind of Smith's secret weapons. And I don't know if we remarked on this last time, and we're kind of jumping into the issue, and maybe we should do a little summary of it. But maybe Felix, do you want to kind of summarize issue 2? There's not a ton of plot that happens, but
sure, it is a pretty straightforward issue. Certainly the first 3/4, let's say. So when last we left Bone, Phone Bone, he'd been separated from his cousins and was told that he needed to get out of the valley before snow came, or he'd be stuck there all winter. And the snow came. So we now see him clearly a few months later, cracking some firewood. I think it's firewood. And getting himself ready and clearly sort of acclimatized to winter in the valley. And we're then introduced to these new characters, the Possum family. And Ms. Possum has some things to do and asks if Phone can look after the Possum boys. He says sure, and they're sort of being terrifically unsafe, as little kids are wont to do. And they are sort of playing a game. He pretends to be a bear, and they run out and are confronted by the two rat creatures. We met the rat creatures last issue, or is this the first? Yeah,
they showed up the last issue, and I think we assume that they're the same ones.
Because they do become sort of they're drawn very slightly differently than all the other rat creatures that we'll meet. I don't think they're ever named, but they become these very sort of charming, strange background characters over the course of the series. So Phone has to sort of save the possum kids from the rat creatures. In doing so, he's chased sort of all around, goes down a waterfall, and there is, as you mentioned, just this excellent sort of action sequence as they're chasing him. And there's an iconic line that sort of gets repeated over the course of the series a number of times. So Phone leaps onto this very tiny branch and says, "Those rat creatures would have to be pretty stupid to follow me onto this frail little branch." Then the next panel, they're on the branch. He yells, stupid rat creatures, and of course snaps, they fall down. He's saved by the dragon, the red dragon, whom we met briefly before. And they have Phone and the dragon have a brief sort of amusing back and forth, and then the possum kids are brought back to their mom, and the mom is none the wiser, thinking that Phone had come up with some kind of crazy story about rat creatures and a dragon to entertain the kids. So
Right.
that's the first part, and then let's say talk about the second part after. So what, particularly about the art, what is it you see as having developed here? Because I really noticed that as you said, that the action is just so much, just so dynamic. And like when I compare this to the scene in the first issue where they're running from the locusts, it
Mm-hmm.
just seems like so much more compelling here, just on a purely artistic level. So could you break that
Yeah.
down a little bit for us?
Yeah, it is interesting. And so much of this is really, really subtle, I think. So, I have one page included in the show notes, but it's the page with the stupid, stupid rat creatures line there. But it's something we commented on before, but that, Smith is someone who, as opposed to most comic artists, has a really, really locked down perspective, and a really locked down viewpoint. And I think that that makes for, meaning that he has to, like, instead of trying to make something dynamic or move by, radically changing the viewpoint and, moving the camera, for lack of a better term, he constructs his action in ways that, so if you look at the top page, where it's 3 panels with basically the same perspective, one showing Phone Bone being, basically showing Phone Bone being chased by the rat creatures, and it doesn't move, but they're just getting closer and closer to us, and it's kind of picking. It's two different panels of narrow escapes by Phone Bone, where they're leaping, just about to leap on him, and he's jumping out of the way, but our perspective doesn't change, and they're getting closer to us as we just read along. And then it zooms out to show still somewhat the same kind of viewpoint. Still that he's at a waterfall, and then we have that sequence that you described, where have to be pretty stupid to follow me on this little branch. And it's that, if he drew it in a different way, where he showed them jumping onto the branch, then the reaction, it's a very I I think a lot of this, it's kind of following the rules of like animation a little bit. It's like
Yeah, that's a
it
good way
just
to
has a
put it.
real rhythm to it. That there's something where it's like, by not being so crazy with his perspective, he's like, it feels almost storyboardish, because it's picking like just the right moments and the right pacing for this whole thing. That's like, okay, I'm going to show 3 panels of running, then I'm going to zoom out real quick, then we're going to have this really zany kind of cut from, they're on the rock, then they're on the branch, and it's
Yeah.
it feels like, even though, cinematic is something that I would associate sometimes with like perspective, zooming, and a lot of camera motion, I actually think like it feels a lot more, it reads almost more like a storyboard as I look at it. And because it's giving you it's just picking the right moments, and it kind of like has just the so much motion to it. And even little, he's so good with his panels. Like, if you turn on to the next page, they fall down this waterfall, and there's a picture of him climbing out of the water, and just in the background you can see the 2 rat creatures swimming towards him. Right, it's a tiny little panel. It's not really, it's a very small use of space, but it's a really great composition. Um, so I just think his composition and just pacing is so good, and has improved.
I think the comparison to animation is really helpful, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife, very good woman, better read than I am, but sort of struggles with reading comics. It doesn't come naturally
Mm-hmm.
to her. She'll do it occasionally, but she doesn't see the movie in her head. Um,
Right.
and she's always sort of amused by I'll be sort of reading a comic and I'll sort of laugh loudly or gasp, um, in the way that one might while watching a really engrossing like action movie or something.
Right.
Sometimes I'll gasp next to her reading a comic book. What's wrong? What's wrong? He's like, oh, he just pulled a gun on him or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think so. For those who are sort of unfamiliar with the way that traditional animation, hand-drawn animation works, and actually, I guess sort of a 3D does a similar thing, but just thinking of traditional hand-drawn animation, which Jeff Smith, the author, was experienced in. So we all understand sort of films are this series of images that are shown quickly enough that our mind kind of makes it seem as though they're moving. It kind of puts together the images. And so even though they're static images shown quickly, it gives the kind of appearance of motion. So it takes a heck of a lot of drawing to make a hand-drawn cartoon. So
Right.
They will traditionally have the sort of most important animators the do what's called storyboarding. So I don't remember the sort of proper number, but let's just pretend and say there were 40 frames per second. You might have the storyboarder doing 1 frame a second, 1 frame every couple seconds, and the in-betweeners are the massive animators who are doing the drawings in between those main sort of storyboards. And the storyboards will generally sort of have all the major action beats, and they'll be sort of the best drawn. And those are the ones that often will kind of stick in your mind. And I do think when you said storyboard, it does feel like that. It does feel kind of filmic in the sense of animated films, particularly the action, that it is like you're seeing all of these crucial moments, and your mind can very easily fill in. And I think this might be part of why Bone is so kind of hyper popular, one of the greatest selling comics of all time, and particularly with kids, because it is so easy to fill in what's happening, in part because the perspective is changing so little that where, if they're standing by a hill, the hill is usually going to stay in that same spot. The rock is going to stay in the same spot, but the characters are moving, and your mind just very easily connects. Okay, the character went from here to here, and they did this and this and this, and this is how they're responding. So that comparison to animation and storyboarding is really helpful for me understanding what makes this art so effective, particularly given that up to this point we haven't really encountered humans,
Right.
and there are going to be a lot of human beings in this series, but so far we've been encountering mainly sort of, for want of a better term, like very cartoony characters. And very sort of simplified, curvy lines, this sort of thing. And I think it's just really effective in that way. Yeah. Okay. So that has given me an insight into sort of how he's working. That was really helpful.
I do think it makes it it's a very readable comic and very engaging because of that. You never really feel lost. And another thing that he does that I think is more cinematic than most cartoonists is if you notice, there's no inner monologue available to us in Bone, and there's no narration. So all of the kind of expression, all of the kind of exposition, and has to be played out through character action and kind of external monologue. Which there is a lot of external monologue that he uses. So characters will talk to themselves often, and kind of narrate what they're thinking that way. But I really, really like that, because I think it means that he has to, the old writing rule, show, not tell, right? Which is such a cliche, but I really, I've always preferred comics that don't rely on narration, that don't rely on kind of internal monologue, because I think it means that you have to work harder for the characters to kind of explain who they are through their actions, and which just is more compelling. And yeah, I'm not sure why he made that choice, but I think it works very well for the story.
And it's funny because I'm somebody who, I've talked about this before. I really like caption boxes, and I
Okay.
really like sort of when well used. I think there's a lot of clunky use of them, particularly in like the 50s. But I really like, especially for more sort of action oriented comics, that can be really useful. But Bone, how would I put it? Um, it's not just it's not just the point you made, about how this necessitates a kind of a more kind of serious effort on Smith's part to have dialogue that really is showing forth the interior life of the person to the extent that he wants us to know it. But also, I think on a storytelling level, it's so much more atmospheric. In
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I'm trying to think. It might be later in this volume when it first happens, but you start to have these times where you'll sort of move from a kind of fun, silly conversation with the Bone cousins or Phone Bone and Thorn or something like that, to the antagonists of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have it with King Doc, the sort of great, huge rat creature later this volume. And it'll be suddenly these sort of dark paneling, and
Mm-hmm.
you're in a very different place, and you quickly understand what's going on without a sort of like, thank you my brothers for coming to the third annual,
Yeah.
evil people doing stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Or what, like there's this sort of, there's storytelling through atmosphere, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
Bone, that's really effective as a storytelling device, but then also just deeply pleasing. Like I remember as a kid being so wowed and just being so kind of impressed upon by these like kind of creepy scenes that we'll see
Mm.
more of later in the book. But yeah, and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
happens in large part because because it just sort of goes from one scene to another, like a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, shall we continue on and
Sure.
wrap
Yeah,
up
I can summarize
the
the rest of
this
this
issue here?
issue.
Yeah.
So now the name of this issue is Thorn, and we finally meet the eponymous Thorn. So Phone is walking through the woods after the possums leave and hears a snap. Says, "Oh, what's that?" Climbs over, looks over a little down a hill, and sees this young woman. This, I want to say she's, what is it, 16 maybe?
Mm-hmm. Seems like
Um,
about that.
16-year-old girl, uh, by what seems to be a hot spring in the snow. So she has a bucket and sort of is wearing this sort of huge warm cloak coat thing. Starts to take off her pants, and Phone's hat and head sort of light on fire in this great comic moment where you sort of think initially is just him thinking she's so beautiful, and sort of quote unquote getting hot, but actually is his sort of already smoking hat from uh, earlier with the dragon. um,
Combusting.
yeah. He falls down. Thorn sees him and in a very sort of friendly way sort of says, "What happened? Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. Come on down. We'll share the pool." And there's just this great page 56 in my edition, um, where she says hello, and Phone kind of comes down all like smoky and everything, and again it's the camera not shifting. You just have her on one side of the
Mm-hmm.
panel sitting there looking at him in a sort of friendly way, him sort of carrying his little ruined burnt up hat, and he stands and looks at her, and then a little heart comes out of him. And then she says, "Are you new around here? Phone Bone, what's yours?" And just like, again, it's that sort of comic timing that it feels like an animated film. Um, he then realizes, oh, this is Thorn, the one that Ted the Bug last issue had told him would know how to get him out of the valley. And he says, "Oh, great. Can you help me get me and my cousins back to Boneville?" "Cousins? There are more of you?" "Yeah, they're stuck in this valley too, but I haven't seen either of them since we got hit by a swarm of locusts." And then she gets a very skeptical look and says, "You don't say. I should have asked that dragon if he'd seen my cousins." "You should have asked who?" "The dragon." "Oh, wait a minute. I get it. You don't believe in dragons, do you?" "No, should I?" "Never mind. I don't care. Once I'm back in Boneville, I'll never have to even think about dragons in this crazy valley again." And they sort of keep talking, and then he references something about rat creatures. And she's, "Did you say rat creatures?" "Let me guess. You don't believe in rat creatures." "Yes, I do. Have you seen one recently?" And they sort of get going because rat creatures are dangerous. And he says he's going to get to come and I think stay at her home. And she's going to introduce him to her grandmother and says, "Oh, aren't you brave? Here, take my hand." And then you have this moment of connection, at least on Phone Bones, and zing, a million hearts sort of show up. "Don't just stand there. Let's go." "Oh, listen, the first birds of spring. We'll have you and your cousins back in Boneville before you know it." Then million hearts. "Boneville? What's Boneville?"
This is a great sequence.
The introduction of Thorn and of Phone Bone's feelings for her. So how do you like this introduction?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, I think one of the things if you look at like page 54 and 56 or 55, I guess, again, this is just another really good example of Smith's pacing. I think it's almost in slow motion. I mean, you have 3 panels of, it's not as naughty as it sounds, but Thorn taking off her pants, where it seems like it goes into slow motion, kind of where he's just like transfixed, and you as the viewer are kind of like seeing this through his eyes in such a slow way. And but then with his combined with that kind of comedic sequence of his head exploding, it is really it's a hilarious introduction, but also again really really, like we said just before, we don't have to keep beating this horse, but very effective use of just kind of timing and sequencing here. The Thorn is an interest. I mean, what do you think of Thorn as a character? I guess. What are your thoughts on her? Maybe we don't have a lot to go off on this introduction, but
at least off of the sort of going off of the first volume, I've read this comic so many times that I have other thoughts. But let's say just sort of looking at the first volume, and kind of this introduction from the beginning, it's clear that she's a sort of caring person.
Right.
Her sort of immediate response to Phone's distress is sort of kind of kind patience, but also she, let's say, is not a bleeding heart. He starts talking about dragons and immediately is very skeptical and very sort of no nonsense about it. Yeah, and I mean, I think she's likable. The way that her face is drawn. This sounds sort of funny because it's the art, right? It's all just black and white. There's not shading, and they're very sort of simple drawings in certain ways. But she's given a very sort of, I don't just want to say intelligent face, but kind of her facial expressions make it very clear that she is quite attentive to what's going on around her. She's very observant. She pays attention. Yes, there's a sort of kindness and realism and intelligence.
Yeah.
Almost a little bit beyond her years.
Right.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Thorn's an interesting character. Just starting off with her design, I think Smith. There's a real, to me, it's interesting. I feel like there's a real arc to Thorn in the comics, not just a character arc, but as a design arc. I think she, man, if you read the early first issues of Thorn, she looks incredibly different. I think he first started drawing her as kind of like a heavy metal kind of metal bikini fantasy character.
This is from the comics before Bone, where he sort of
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, her haircut is kind of the only constant, it seems like, throughout this. So she has a lot of evolution before she even shows up in the Bone series in the actual final comic book form. But then I think he seems to figure out how to draw her better kind of halfway through, then seems to get a little lazy towards the end. I don't know. There's like, that is one of the interesting things about Smith. He's insanely consistent with his less realistic characters. So like I think the Bones are a good example of that, just real consistency there. But I think that is the one area that I feel like is a little, that he is less consistent with his more realistic characters. I think he kind of gravitates towards more cartoony designs. And then like when he goes kind of more subtle, like with Thorn, her design changes a lot just in the features of her face, I feel like, over the course
and
of the
I think
series.
Thorn more than any other character, actually.
Yeah.
Like Grandma
Yes,
Ben,
I would agree with that.
Grandma Ben, who we'll meet soon. She's a relatively realistic sort of old lady character, but she tends to be quite on model. But
yeah,
especially in sort of coming, like, I don't know what to say, sort of action shots, I guess.
Yeah.
She'll often look sort of a little bit off. And we don't have that here yet, but
yeah.
It does happen. Sorry, there's a specific image I'm just thinking of in a later volume that I'm trying to find. Yeah, so if you have the one volume edition, like page 596, when she sort of suddenly comes out and sort of shows herself in this tense situation.
That's a classic one. Yeah,
like, it's a really cool image, but she just doesn't look anything like herself.
Yeah.
Like even the next page, she looks super different and a lot better.
Right.
And it's not that happens a lot.
That's always one that's jumped out to me too.
And it's not that happens a lot, but it does happen. And I think that is something that he sort of struggles a bit with. And it's interesting because his sort of three sort of major works since Bone, have all been with human characters. So it's the Shazam book, Wrassle, which is weird but cool, and then Tukey, which I haven't read. Now Tukey is with sort of like caveman characters, and so there might be a little bit more sort of cartooniness there. I think at least with Wrassle, he kind of like uses this. I don't want to say this. He uses this kind of slight weakness to his advantage, and it works. Like I think the character designs, I don't know. It's hard to describe. We aren't reading Wrassle anyway, so I won't talk more about that. But
I think it's not really a criticism. I mean, I guess it kind of is. It's just one of those areas I think that I've noticed. Like sometimes I'll see a drawing of Thorn by Smith, and I'm like, what? How did you like let this go? Like, especially post Bone, actually, after he's done with Bone, like it seems like Jeff Smith can draw the Bone characters in his sleep, and it just looks amazing, and Thorn sometimes, like even the cover of Thorn, I don't know if I can find it, but I'm just like, dude, why did you pick this drawing for the cover? Like, this looks so wrong. So that is just kind of one of the areas of inconsistency, I think. And I really do think it just comes down to that she's such a focal point, so much more realistic in many ways than, she's not like super realistic, but than the other characters around her. And I think that just means that there's just like she's almost kind of working against his more, I think he's just such a fantastic cartoonist, that it works maybe against his strengths a little bit. But as far as a character goes, I agree with you. I think I think the things I appreciate about Thorn, this was drawn, almost 30 years ago now, or maybe actually 30 years ago now. So this was before the girl boss trope, but that's a trope that, I think is very recognizable in modern storytelling. You have the main kind of character who's like kind of an avatar of female empowerment, meaning that she has no flaws. She, the universe kind of exists to affirm her. And that's about it. Right.
Yeah. The closest thing to a flaw that she'll generally have is a sort of lack of self-confidence. And
right. Yes.
Self-confidence. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the Bella Swan is actually, well, Bella Swan's not really a girl boss. I don't know what Bella Swan is. But,
I don't know what she is. But
yeah.
Captain Marvel.
But yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. That it's, you didn't believe in yourself enough is your only flaw. So Thorn is not that she's someone who feels much more rounded. She's not perfect. She makes mistakes. She's not like she can do everything, even though she turns out to be a significant person. That is fairly central to this story. And, but she also has, like you said, she's kind. She's not someone who's arrogant or mean. She feels like were I Phoney Bone, I could have a crush on Thorn very easily because she's a nice person. So I not Phoney Bone, Phone Bone. So I get it. Honestly, I kind of wonder if Thorn is kind of like, I don't know, like a tribute to his wife a little bit. One of the things I do get, I don't know a lot of Jeff Smith's personal biography or whatever, but I do get the sense that him and his wife have a very loving relationship, that he thinks very highly of her. This book is dedicated to her.
And we talked about this a little bit last time, but like, she's the only reason that this was able to happen. Like that he was able to start Bone. She said like, you've always wanted to do this. Like, let's talk through this. Okay. Like I'm going to take this sort of higher paying job that will be kind of miserable and will like live simply. And you've got 1 year for this to take off. And if it takes off within a year, then we can keep going with it. And if it doesn't, then you'll sort of go back to doing animation and we'll close the door on it. And then sort of as it kind of took off like crazy, she eventually quit her job and went sort of full-time doing administrative stuff for Bone. And just throughout the whole thing was just hugely supportive. And she just seems like, there's this one of my favorite sort of comics YouTubers, Matt with like 3 or 4 T's, has this interview with the two of them. And it is just like, they're clearly just kind of having a good time sort of reminiscing of this crazy story, but it's just clear how much the two of them respect each other. And really love each other, and how sort of like this sounds sort of maybe banal, but like how kind of impressed with her as a person he is.
I get that. I don't know. It comes, and that's why I don't want to say, this is total speculation, and I don't have a lot to go off with this, but I guess maybe I could just say is Thorn feels like a very lovingly written character to me. I think that's right. Like there's, like she's not unrealistic. She's not perfect.
But she's good.
But she's good. Kind of yeah. And I do appreciate, how the story kind of treats her, I guess I could say. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's like she grows as a person. She's faced with challenges, and as the story goes, but it I don't know. It feels like it's written. She's a character that Smith especially cares about, and I mean, and she's been kicking around for a long time in his head. So
it's funny because she is like, well, we'll get into this probably in the next volume, but she is like very much a teenager still. Like there are teenagery decisions that she makes.
Right.
Yeah. But we're 40 minutes in and just got through one more issue. We're really not going to do the whole series this way. How about if you give a sort of speed summary of issue 3, Phoney Bone?
Right. Yeah. So Phoney Bone, we have a kind of ominous first panel of Phoney Bone in silhouette, but we're back at the farm. It's Phone Bone is waking up, and him and Thorn have conversations, and they're waiting for Grandma Ben to return. They're gonna take care of some chores. Unfortunately, Phone Bone isn't very manly enough to chop wood, so we have a fun sequence where he's hanging off of an axe, and Thorn asks him, "What kind of manly thing are you calling that?" And he's like, "Chin ups, go do the dishes." So that always cracked me up. But he tries to talk to her about the dragon. She doesn't believe in the dragon. The dragon's having fun with this, appearing right outside of Thorn's eyesight. And significantly, after they have a conversation, Phone Bone tries to talk to her about Moby Dick, which is
his favorite book.
His favorite book, but no one's interested in it. Makes everyone fall asleep when he tries to read it or talk about it to him. Yeah, exactly. But he shows her a map, and the map that he found in the previous issue, in the mountains that
Smiley found and sold to Phoney for $1.
Right. Exactly. Crucially. Yeah. It looks like a child's drawing of the mountains, and this triggers some sort of recollection with Thorn. It reminds her of something, but she can't quite put her finger on it. We then cut to Phoney, who is lost and miserable in the woods. And this is, I think, a good example of kind of the external monologue that we were talking about, where he's basically just, yelling at the world, kind of almost, cursing the heavens that he's been so abandoned. And I guess we're to assume that Phoney has just been trudging through the woods miserable all winter, because he doesn't look like he's had a very good winter as compared to Phone, who kind of, made a nice little home for himself.
Yeah.
Phoney encounters the dragon and finally Ted the Bug, who introduces him to Grandma Ben, who this is the first time we're seeing Grandma Ben as well in this comic, but Thorn's grandma. And conflict immediately ensues.
Because the one thing we learn about her is that she races cows and she loves cows. Phoney, though, says, "No, I don't want to ride one of your stupid cows." And immediately we go from Grandma Ben being a total sweetheart to Phoney to basically 1,000-page animosity.
Yeah, they do not get along, and that doesn't really change throughout the course of the series. This might be just a good place to pause before we can go all the way through here. I mean, essentially, Phoney is forcibly drugged. It sounds like he's being driven on a racing cow. The events happen out of sight, but it seems very dramatic. He's not making a great first impression with Grandma Ben. She thinks that the bones are maybe pets that Thorn wants to keep, and she doesn't want to keep them. Phoney thinks maybe they're going to milk them or something like that. So it's not great. It winds up with them with Phoney eating Grandma Ben's pie that Thorn was cooking for her. So not off to a great start.
To get her in a good mood to butter her up to convince him to let him stay.
Yeah. So maybe, this might be a good opportunity. So what do we like? We talked about Thorn, but what about Phoney, who really, this is his issue, kind of his reintroduction. He was in the first one, but,
he's a sort of, you love to hate him character. Yeah. And he, particularly at the beginning, is just sort of really trying to sort of look out for himself, but not even exactly for himself, mostly just for money.
Right.
He's always looking to sort of make a buck. He was the richest bone in Boneville. And in the upcoming issues, there are just these great sort of little bits and pieces of stories of ridiculous things that Phoney did to make money, usually pretty unethical. and he as a character, he deepens a bit later on, but at this point, he's just this, like I said, sort of you love to hate him kind of a guy, which is a character that, like, a character trope kind of that I really enjoy. I think is really good to have one of those around.
Yeah, I love Phoney. He's probably one of my favorite characters. Especially when him and Smiley get together and get off on their.
The two of them just have the best dynamic.
Yeah, it is a great dynamic because Smiley is somehow he's like so innocent, but he's such an idiot that he just like plays in perfectly with all his schemes, so he's like too stupid to have a real good sense of a real good conscience, and Phoney has no conscience whatsoever. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like an analog for a character like Phoney. I mean, the closest I can think, he has a little bit of Daffy Duck about him, kind of that personality. But he's a little bit of Uncle Scrooge, there's
especially sort of early Scrooge is what I think
of like bad Scrooge.
Yeah, when he's still kind of the bad guy.
Yeah. He's I think the way that Smith draws him is so expressive, though. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons, like, you just can't help but love him, is his, for lack of a better term, the acting he does. Whereas if you were watching a play and someone pulled off a performance like this on stage, you'd be cracking up because he's so expressive. Like this first introduction, his expressions are changing. He's doing these kind of very operatic poses. Then, like I think a great example is on page 73, where, he's like, "Oh, cruel, cruel fate, why have you abandoned your most beloved son?"
I love that.
And then just a totally annoyed, so it's this dramatic kind of, crying to the heavens, then like just a totally like bugged and ticked off expression. He's a butthead, but he's kind of a lovable butthead, I don't know. And I think the dynamic once he shows up is great because it definitely makes, kind of sparks fly with all these different characters. Grandma Ben, she gets a lot more development as the series goes on. It's kind of hard to know what to make of her at first. Mm-hmm. But I think, she's a pretty interesting character as well, that when she appears here, we kind of get the full extent of like what she's like. She's a very sweet old lady, the sweetest old grandma who somehow races cows and can like beat anyone up. So it's a pretty fun little, and
it's funny because she starts out very, I don't want to say light exactly, but as more of a comedic character. And I think she has one of the most interesting developments of any character in the series. I'll leave it at that, but
right,
she's one to watch.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, yeah, exactly.
I love, by the way, her this joke. So he's saying, where is it? After Grandma Ben has come in and Phoney Bone has been sort of violently thrown into the house, ended up in a pot in the fireplace. Says, "Phone Bone, save me! That crazy old lady tried to kill me." "Well, bless my buttons! What have we got here?" Seeing Phone Bone. "Watch out! Don't let her get a hold of you." "Hello, ma'am. Do you like cows? I know your friend doesn't." "I don't like to ride them, you old bat." And then Thorn comes in and says, "Phone Bone loves cows." "Sorry, dear, you can't keep them." "But no buts. I don't want any pets running around the house." "Grandma, they're not pets." "Can you milk them? If you can't milk them, they're pets." I just think that line is great. I just think it's so funny. And as you alluded to a little bit later, Phoney is trying to escape, and Phone is saying, "Stop it! Like they're going to help us get back to Boneville. Not worth it. Let go of me." "Would you wait a minute? We can explain everything." "Help! Help! They've destroyed my cousin's brain. Oh no! They've already milked you, haven't they?"
Yeah,
that line just gets me. Just the comedy of that Phoney brings with him. Is so great. I won't spoil it, but next issue, or maybe the one after that, there's another really great one involving a scheme that got him kicked out of of Boneville. Um,
That one did
yeah,
jump out at me too. Yeah. And I think one of the interesting things too is we see here the relationship between, I mean, I guess Phone is really the conscience of the Bones, right? And I think he
he's the
really
sort of
has,
everyman, basically good guy. Yeah,
yes, yeah. And he doesn't really change. I think right away, like, um, he's the main kind of dynamic I think here is his love for Thorn, right? Which starts off as kind of a crush, but develops as their relationship develops as the series goes, and it kind of gets deeper, not really romantically, but just more as kind of like actual friends. But but it's definitely, he's definitely smitten with Thorn at this point. But then, when Phoney shows up, he's like your most annoying cousin, right? Who's
yeah,
like, who knows that you like this girl, and he's going to be totally unsubtle about it. So
yeah.
he's like, do you have a thing going on with her and stuff like that? Like, so he's like, not only is he just a jerk, he's like the worst person to have show up, like he's
Yeah,
ruining the situation. He's making a terrible first impression. And then he's like, letting it out that you have a thing for this
he's
girl.
sort of middle school-esque.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with like, kind of the romantic side
Yeah.
of things. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. So this, anything else to add about this issue here?
The last page, the gag where Phoney eats a slice of the pie, Phoen starts to flip out, and then Phoney, it's hard to describe for those who haven't read it, but then Phoney stuffs the whole pie with a single slice out of it into Phone Bone's head and kind of completely reconfigures its shape. That just gets me every time. I think this moment of comedy is hilarious.
It does bring up an interesting question as to what are the bones, which is something you don't really ever. They definitely seem to have kind of like Looney Tunes rules apply to them.
Definitely,
yeah. Like if it's funny, you can do it, I think is the rule of Looney Tunes. But they're very there's moments where I think, what is it, where Phone flexes and suddenly has a huge bicep. So I kind of think the closest analog for them though is like kind of Karl Barks's Ducks, in that they're people. They're not animals. They're just like the ducks are really people. Like Uncle Scrooge is the world's richest man, apparently. But so somehow the bones they're not humans, but they are like people. It's a mysterious thing. Like no one really ever questions like
absolutely
their categorization, but they definitely seem to be much more Looney Tunes than like Thorn or anyone else.
Yeah, and it's never really sort of central to the story. It very rarely it's just sort of, oh, these strange little people, and exactly. Part of it also, like, there are a lot of sentient non-human creatures in the valley, like Ted the Bug we met, and the rat creatures, so no one really thinks twice particularly about them, but yeah, it is, and their design I think is just great. We are not going to get through another issue.
I think you may be right.
But I think next time we can get through 3 and then we'll have finished the first volume. I initially had these dreams of doing the first 3 volumes over 4 episodes. Very clearly not happening, but we roll with the punches.
That's right.
As we sort of said last episode, these are probably sort of all ages comics, with a little bit of fear, a hard PG, let's say, maybe a soft PG-13, but really it's something I'd happily give to a 10-year-old, and highly recommended. Obviously, I hope you're all reading along because they're really, really excellent. Any kind of final thoughts on your end from these 2 issues as we start to get a little bit deeper into into Bone?
No, I think we're building up to probably one of my, well, gosh, it just starts getting so good,
Yeah.
I think these are fantastic issues, but as I'm looking ahead, Great Cow Race, Eyes of the Storm, Dragon Slayer. I mean, these are
Yeah.
all probably some of my favorites, just for a whole number of reasons. So, Out from Boneville is a great beginning for the first volume, but things just keep on getting better.
Yeah, it pulls you in, but it's what comes after that really, works.
Right.
All right, so next week we'll continue our discussion of Bone by reading hopefully the next 3 issues and finish off the first volume.
Right.
If you enjoyed this episode of Truth Beauty Comics, there are 3 things you can do for the podcast to support it. The first is to keep listening and tell your friends about the podcast.
The second is to review the podcast, giving it 5 stars on whatever you use to listen to it. The last thing you can do is consider contributing to our Patreon with a monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can get perks like access to exclusive episodes, voting on upcoming episodes, and even original drawing from me. But most of all, you can help make this podcast sustainable.
That's the end of the episode. You can reach out to us at truthbeautycomics@gmail.com or on our social media accounts. Thanks for listening, and remember to take comics seriously and have fun while doing it.